viewing horses is really scary, and getting on horses you don't know is scary, and it can knock your confidence.
There is a way that you write things on purpose to put that horse in a good light. This episode is brought to you by Premier Performance. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of This Equestrian Life, where we wax lyrical about all things life and equestrian. How are you, Rhi? How are you doing this gloomy Friday?
Happy Wednesday. I'm really excited for today's
Wednesday?
topic.
You okay?
Well, yeah. No.
It's Friday.
Yeah, but it's going to be published on Wednesday.
Oh!
I'm saying happy Wednesday to our listeners.
Okay, I'm not up to speed. I thought you were dead.
Well, I'm really excited for today's topic because we're going to be talking about buying and selling horses, of which Miri and I have many stories. But yeah, this week I fell off my horse for the second time ever.
Oh no.
I know. There's a whole video of it because I sort of like explained it on my Instagram, so you can go have a look there. But bless him, we're just jumping and we've started to introduce fillers, and he's just sort of caught his foot on a pole before a jump and decided that he couldn't actually take off and had a little stop. But bless him, he's so sweet. I was actually really struck by how quickly his confidence came back. So like I got back on, we dropped everything down, cavalettis and poles, and then cross poles, and then back up to straight bars. And within like a few jumps, he's like back to the way he felt before, like wanting to go ears forward, doesn't feel like he's backing off. Whereas I was like, it's taking me a bit longer, but I'm just going to pretend. So that was amazing.
It's interesting actually, isn't it? That it's good that he's really honest in that way. And I don't mean necessarily honest like I'll jump a jump on any stride. He's honest like, oh, I need a little moment. Let's build this back up. Actually, now I feel really good. Yep, carry on. Rather than not showing you how he really feels.
Yeah, definitely. And actually that's been something that I think we've grown as we've grown in a relationship. Like I could tell it rattled him a little bit that I came off. Obviously he's a bit younger and I've only come off him once. So I'm hoping not many people have fallen off him before. And there was a little moment when I went to go on where he was like, I'm not sure actually. And I was like, it's okay, everything's cool. But it was also a great moment to remind people that wearing a body protector while you're jumping is a great idea, because I saw it coming. We have these little tiny like metal fillers that sit under the fences, and I landed on it on my back and then slid down it, and there is quite a bruise on my thigh at the moment. So I'm pretty glad it's that and not my back. So yeah.
For sure, yeah. Body protectors. I bought we'll talk about this one day, actually, safety, and the importance and the rise of it and the various protocols that go with it and stuff. But I bought myself an air jacket last year because I started jumping again, and I was like, I think I would like something to support me when I hit the ground. And I've never really got on with body protectors, because I think I'm quite I've got quite a broad rib cage. I think historically when I used to wear them when I was a child, they didn't fit very well, and so now when I'm older I haven't got back into wearing one despite having a relatively dangerous career. But the air jacket was a great solution for me because it gives me a good level of protection if I come a cropper, but it's a more sort of functioning feeling thing for me because it's just lighter. So yeah, definitely an interesting topic to come back on. Well, I'm glad you're not more injured. That's rubbish. Falling off sucks. Falling off, I don't really believe is should be something that happens a lot with horses. I think we maybe get onto this topic at some point, but I sometimes you see people online and they're posting about how they're falling off all the time. Yeah. And I'm like, I think you might be missing some steps. It's a slightly different situation. You're an amateur rider producing a young horse, and there are going to be moments where he's a bit greener or you're a bit greener or whatever it might be. But if you see professionals and they're like, oh yeah, I fell off loads of times this week, and I'm thinking, oh, and or people saying that when they're backing young horses, often saying, oh, he just bucked me off, it's fine. I'm like, not fine. You're missing things. There are things that need to be in place. A spooky filler and a unexpected stop is a very different situation. But every single time I get on my horse he bucked me off, and then I get back on and he's okay, I'm thinking we need to look at the steps in place. So I think it's an interesting situation and concept in terms of falling off, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I watched the video back as you always do, and it always looks so much slower, and I could see it from a mile off. It's the exact same reason I came off him last time. He spooked randomly at I think it was a duck, and my left heel, my left leg just isn't as down as it should be. We all have slight imbalances, and my heels just weren't down. Like the weight just wasn't down my leg. And as soon as I fell off, my coach was like, I got up. She was like, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She was like, "So let's talk about why you fell off." And I was like, "Because my heels weren't down." So you know, sometimes it's something really simple, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
How was your week?
Wet, gloomy, rainy. I have had a cough, only a nighttime cough though, because as you can tell now, no cough. 3 a.m. cougher I have become, which has been very unpleasant and really annoying. And then I wake up in the morning and I think, do I need to have a day off today? No, Miriam, you feel absolutely fine. Get up and get on with it. And I'm like, okay. And the weather has been really diabolical in the UK. We've had some really bad, watery, stormy things that have passed over. So I gave my TikTok trousers a good testing this week. They, in fact, are definitely not waterproof. Got scammed again, didn't I? They're nice and warm, but they're not waterproof when you ride 6 horses in literal sideways downpour. So that was, I mean, fine. Just part of the job. I finished watching Yellowstone. I won't share any spoilers, but that is a series that I enjoyed. Some very interesting horsemanship stuff. I'm doing some hand gestures because I want to be diplomatic, but gosh, what's going on? One thing I must say, and I never find a space where I can talk about this, why do people that create TV programs or films that have animals in them, horses particularly, have they never spent time with an actual horse? The neighing thing. The neighing.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Why? You know, they're like, this horse is like screaming its head off, and you're thinking, well, this is so unrealistic. Horses don't make noise like that all the time. And why does nobody tell anyone? They're huge Hollywood productions with £1 million budgets. Not a single person is going, hi guys, I think we just need to cut the horse sound out, because I don't know if you've noticed, those 100 horses we've just been filming with, silent. Pretty much silent. Absolutely boils my piss. Anyway, that's my 2 pennies worth on that. Do you want to know another thing that really boils my piss?
Yes.
Today.
That's a very... that phrase bothers me. I don't think
it might get cut out. Amy might have cut that out. Anyway, another thing that really grinds my gears. Better?
Oh, no, yeah. No, I don't want to censor you. You say whatever you want.
Oh, okay. Well, so from my yard, we ride out onto a 60-mile-an-hour road, and we'll, again, talk about this maybe another time with, like, a proper topic of it, but I just wanted to touch on this because it really, me and the 2 other people who I was hacking with today were actually really upset by this incident. We are riding down the road, we are high-vised, head to toe, horses wearing high-vis, humans wearing high-vis. Did you know your insurance won't be valid if your horse isn't wearing high-vis? Because if you become separated, they have to be wearing high-vis too. Very, very important. Even if it's just a pair of high-vis boots.
Is that?
Yeah.
I googled this because I thought the same thing, but apparently it depends on the policy.
Oh,
it's
okay,
like not whatever, but
a good base to cover, right?
It is a good base to cover because what they do say from my research is that even if it's not covered, even if it's not like a thing of your insurance, a guide or whatever, it puts you in a better position should you ever go to court, because you're like, actually, I was very visible, I was taking all the steps to be safe, So
right. So there, anyway. Picture this: 3 riders, single file on it is actually 60 mile an hour, this road, but it obviously is. There's no white line down the middle. Like, it's not, it's not a great road, but we're very visible. It's not dark or anything, and we're always very well, lit up with our high vis. Single file going down the road, and there's a van coming towards us, and he's going really fast, and I do my arm up and down, the wafting arm, and he doesn't slow down, so I give him my very passive-aggressive thumbs down. Now, I've taken to that as a way of showing my distaste for the situation or my displeasure with that person doing that, because you don't want to gesticulate and swear at them with your fingers or whatever it might be. Like, you want to try and be as diplomatic as you can, but when I'm riding a horse that is a grown-up, I tend to think to myself, I want to explain myself to that person that how much they slowed down wasn't enough, maybe. So I gave him this thumbs down, and he kept going. He was probably going 30, and the national legal limit is 10. So I was like, you know, he was going a fair whack. Past horses, yes, thank you. And then he keeps going down the road. He turned around in our driveway and then he came back, and when I say he went fast, I said he's turning around. So Aoife, who works for me, she got her phone out at the back and she just like carefully held her phone up. I should wear a hat cam, but it's one of those, I'm often like hacking one, schooling one, hacking one, teaching someone, so it's really hard to like be super organised with that. And he went, all three of us, we were really shaken. Horses were fine. They were all real grown-up horses. But if I'd been on a 4-year-old or a vulnerable horse or a first hack, because sometimes I don't get a choice and I do have to go that way, that could have been a really, really bad situation. And he properly floored it past us and put his foot down. And I thought, he didn't have a written van or anything, which is a pain, because I would have just rung up the company and said, and I have done that before when I've had instances with stickered vans or stickered cars or whatever. It was just horrible. Like, my heart rate was really high. I felt really like unsafe. I felt quite angry. I felt so many different emotions. And, you know, for like 10 seconds of this guy's life, he could have just slowed down. And there was no accident. Of course there wasn't. But there's only going to be so many times there isn't an accident. There's a fact, actually, that's really relevant to this that I wish more people knew, is that a horse, when they can spook as fast as 56 miles an hour. Yeah, your face says it all, right? Because the speed at which they can go from A to B in like a very small space is 56 miles an hour. So like if a bird flew out on their left side and you end up in front of that van, nobody can put their foot on the brakes hard enough, fast enough. So that was my experience today, and that was pretty horrible. I mean, yeah, nothing bad came of it, but not fun.
No, I'm sorry to hear that. And if you are in the UK, I believe it's the BHS, and if it is, I will link it in the show notes. If this ever happens to you on a road, you can record it, and it's really important that you do, even if you don't have footage, which is what the police need. But the BHS have a system where you can go and tell them what's happened. It's really important because every time that you log it, they can start to see hot spots, particular areas of the country, areas of road. And what that does is means if they see a hot spot that's coming up again and again, they can inform the police, and the police can do like traffic stops. They've done a lot in the rural areas around by me in Surrey, where they've got police riders on horses going up and down the roads, checking in with drivers, etc. Because these statistics, I feel like I read some really awful things quite frequently now when it comes to horses and riders on roads. So even if you don't have the footage, you should still report this kind of behaviour, because that's not okay.
Yeah, it's a good reminder I need to do that, actually, because I have got the video, so his number plate will be on the video, and hopefully, he might get a phone call or something. I don't know how it works, but yeah, scary stuff. Certainly scary stuff. I've got a funny story, actually, to tell you about this. We used to wear high vis that said polite across the top. Have you seen those ones?
The ones that look like police.
They look like police. And we were riding down the road, and there was a guy coming up behind us, and we waved our arm to ask him to slow down, and he stopped behind us. And we were like, so then we stopped and were like, oh, you can keep coming. And he crept past us. He wound his window down, and he was like, is everything okay? And we were like, yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you so much for slowing down. Please carry on. And he was like, oh, I didn't know what to do. I've never been pulled over by mounted police before. It was so funny. We were like, oh, no problem. Not pulling you over. Keep going. We didn't know what to do. I just had to pretend that I was mounted police, and then off he went.
You've impersonated a police officer, Miri. Yeah. And now you've said it in public.
Oh, sorry. But he was such a harmless guy, and he wasn't even driving particularly fast, but we were coming to a narrower bit, so we just asked him to slow down, and he was so like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know what to do. It was hilarious. Anyway.
Good karma for that man.
Good karma for that man. And bad karma for me for just going along with it, but it was quite funny for the moment. Harmless fun. Shall we crack on with our topic of today?
Yes. So we thought today we would go into the topic of buying and selling horses. We have really interesting perspectives on this because Miri has sold and bought horses. I've obviously bought my own horses. We've even been to a viewing together. once upon a time.
That was an experience, wasn't it? We can talk about that one.
That was a day. That was a day. So we thought, you know, a lot of people will be buying horses for the first time this year, or buying horses again, and it is an awful experience buying and selling horses. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. It's terrible. So we thought we'd get into it.
Why do you say it's terrible? What makes you say that?
Oh, I just feel like it's horrible for everyone involved. And obviously, I've never sold horses, so I can only speak as a buyer. But like, going through all the adverts, you feel like you're constantly having to verify information. Information gets left out because people don't want you to ask. And then you feel like you're having to ask questions, or make sure that you ask every question to get the answer that you're looking for. And then if you travel around the country looking at horses, sometimes you turn up and you know immediately as you get out of the car that they're not the horse for you. And it's just time spent all round. And it's nerve-wracking, you know, for a lot of people. This will be some of the most money they've ever spent in their life. Like, I remember the night before I bought Woody, I was like, this is a lot of money for me. And it was
Woody
a real,
your first
like...
horse?
Woody was my first horse, who I bought when I was 28. And I'd saved and saved and saved, and I couldn't afford one before that. And it's like, it's a terrifying amount of money to purchase. You're buying an animal, you don't know what's coming down the road, and it's just not a fun experience. I didn't enjoy looking for horses. I think it could be fun for like a week, and then it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm often part of helping people look for horses, so people often like use me as like a sounding board, basically, because I have a good eye when it comes to confirmation and reading between the lines. Because when you have sold horses, there is an element and there is a way that you write things that are, you know, on purpose to put that horse in a good light. And I think that's quite complicated, because essentially it becomes a bit... You've got to get to a point where you want people to turn up. Now, I'm not that person anymore. I don't sell horses anymore, so I think I can talk quite openly about and candidly about who I was before and the situation that I was in, and then the kind of the methods that you had to go by. But it's a hard thing to sell horses. It's a very hard thing to buy horses. Should we start by talking about the kind of the first steps, maybe, and like work through it in terms of that?
Yeah.
So like reading adverts and the kind of things that you want to be looking out for, because there are things like, not a novice ride. That is a red flag, major red flag. And unless you are very, very experienced and you have ridden for a very long time and you are really capable and also have very good help on the ground, like you have a really good support system, that isn't maybe a horse for you, because almost certainly it will have a quirk, doing the air quotes when I say it, or it will have something wrong with it that will mean that it is not fit for purpose, potentially. So I think adverts are a very complicated thing, and can you think of any other examples, Rhi, that come up when I say that?
Yeah, and like you, I've worked with my coach to buy my last 2 horses. And having someone, as you said, who's a professional, and you can pay people to do this, like often coaches will do it, but you can also pay people to be an intermediary, is like super helpful, like Miri, because they can see things in the language and in the videos that you wouldn't. And it's all very personal. Like, I don't love to see language like, can be cold backed. I don't like that, because, and this will upset people, but I don't like to see language like that. Go on.
Well, because often a horse that is cold-backed, it's a symptom of something else. And this is the thing, exactly. People say can be cold-backed, and I think, okay, well, it's probably got ulcers or kissing spine, or it's lame behind, or it's got sore feet, or whatever it might be, because all of those things joining in together makes the horse put its back up. Horses don't just do things. They don't just choose to do them. They are doing them because they feel something in their body, or they are responding to something that they're not prepared for. So, yeah, agreed. I don't like language like that either, because it glosses over what is the reality, right?
And when I was looking for my first horse, I used to really like adverts that were like an eventer who'd done XYZ and is now looking to step down. That to me would feel really comforting and quite exciting. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, okay, why are they looking to step down? Mm-hmm. What does their... And often, actually, not often, okay, but whenever I've looked at that horse's record, something has gone wrong at the level. Mm-hmm. Either they've gotten frightened, they've had a fall, they've been pushed, whatever it is, and that horse now has a challenge at that level. And even if you are never going to get up there, there's something that then that horse has experienced. You
see people also saying doesn't like flat work. you know, doesn't want to go it, like would prefer not to go in the arena or something along those lines. And again, that is another red flag of like, most sound, happy horses will be able to trot round in the arena on both reins and have a canter on both leads and trot over some poles, jump a little jump, if they're sound. If they're not, then that's probably why they don't want to do that. You know, there's almost always a causal link that needs to be found. And it does mean that maybe there are less viable saleable horses, but then I think we'll come on to that, like the responsibility of an owner when it comes to that point. I would like to talk about that today, because I think that's a big part of selling horses.
Yeah, but I think to that point around the flat work, like, use your common sense. Like, when I bought Harley, I'm sure the owner before me won't mind me saying, we keep in touch, she wanted him as a dressage horse. She did a lot of dressage, not much of loads else, just from the circumstances, and they just said, like, he's not going to be a dressage horse, like, through and through. And I know that. I know he likes the variety in his work, and actually he's happy doing the flat work, but he likes to do other things as well. So there's a bit of a, like, use your common sense when you read these things. But then I guess it's looking at the videos themselves. I don't like it when I can't see a transition. So if they cut from a trot to a canter and there's no transition, don't love that. And then it's knowing yourself. I remember sending a video to my coach once, and I was like, oh, this horse looks really lovely. And she came back to me and she was like, yeah, he does, but look at how big his canter stride is. Look at how much he's really leaping off that jump in the water or whatever it was. She was like, do you really want a horse with that kind of an engine? Which was a really fair question, and it's actually something I hadn't really noticed. And I thought about it, and I was like, actually, if I did sit on this horse at a viewing, it probably would feel like too much. And so it's okay to recognise those things. But yeah, your eyes lit up when I mentioned the transitions.
Yeah. Videos. Oh, gosh. You see some shocking videos and you're like, you're trying to watch it like this, and the horse, I'm squinting, by the way, for anybody who's listening. You're trying to see it. The horse is like in a field, like miles away, and you only ever see it in canter, or you only ever see it in trot. You never see it walk. No one ever posts a video. I would love to see a horse walk, because that's quite a telling sign of whether they feel restful in their body, whether they walk and go on the bit, you know. Yeah, quality of video, seeing them from walk to trot to canter back to trot, change the rein. That's the kind of video that I want to see, where you see a full little dressage test almost, making sure that the horse is actually able to do those things without throwing its head in the air and bucking. And I think this brings me onto a topic that I wanted to mention about, because it's important to acknowledge and remember that horses are a big like responder of their rider. So potentially the horse could have lots of potential to be the horse that you want it to be, but they're not being like encouraged in the right way by their current rider. So it is also important to be able to see talent between the lines, basically, and be able to say, okay, actually that horse is being ridden in a really difficult situation. You know, you can tell the ground is bad, or the surface of the arena isn't good, and the rider isn't really supporting them. I'm still interested in going and having a look, because inherently the horse looks kind and balanced and rhythmical, and not like it's in a lot of sort of discomfort, maybe would be a good way of looking at it. Because yeah, that can be may have a huge point. And I think that brings us quite well on to actually that horse that we went to see together. Because there were a few things, weren't there, when we first arrived that were, I thought, okay, this horse isn't going to be able to show us his best ability because of some of the things that were evident.
Yeah, so for context, I was looking for my second horse, who is now Harley, and I'd been looking with my coach, and we'd had quite a specific wish list. Like, I knew I wanted a gelding, personal preference. I knew I wanted an Irish Draft type. I knew the kind of size I was looking for, and the attitude, and the paces and all the rest of it. And I'd been pretty good, and actually in working in that way, I'd looked at hundreds of thousands of videos and adverts and only viewed like a handful. So I'd really narrowed it down. Anyway, Miri, my coach couldn't come with me to view this horse. He was an ex-eventer. He was 8. He was like really nice age, looked lovely. And I asked Miri if she'd come with me as like a professional. And she did. And yeah, we arrived and I just wasn't great. His shoes didn't look great. We were, so if you ever haven't been to a viewing, it's always nice if you're like seeing them without any tack and stuff. Sometimes they come in from the field, sometimes they're in the stable, and you get the chance to see them trotted up. You get the chance to have a feel over their body and see if they're responding in a bad way anywhere. And he sort of like, we went down his back and he had a little bit of a sort of response, and we were like, ooh, don't love that. And then you know, there was just a few things, and I often think about that viewing and think, would there have been a point where we should have just been like, actually, because it was nothing so bad that you were like, no, this is a hard no, but it was just like, ooh, don't like this, don't like that.
It was one of those, it was that moment where, like I was saying about like understanding that maybe this horse isn't being cared for in the best way possible, because like his shoes were really, they were like hanging off. Yeah. And then the girl picked up the saddle pad and it practically stood up on its own, and I thought, okay, she's not really caring that much about that kind of thing. The saddle didn't fit at all. That was very obvious. The bridle was not good at all, and the horse's teeth were very due. And like, so all of those things are the things that I was really like, I put my thumb in the horse's mouth and felt its teeth. I really felt through his back. Like, we were really, like, between us, we were like, you're like a detective when you're buying a horse, right? And we saw him move and he seemed quite sound, so we thought, okay, let's keep going, you know. It wasn't like a hard no, was it? And he seemed very sweet and kind, so it was one of those things. I mean, he turned out to have a quite serious defect, didn't he?
Well, this was when I talked earlier about asking the right questions. Like, one of the questions I've learned to ask is like, does this horse have any vices? And like, I will list examples of vices, like weaving, for example. And it's only sometimes by asking very direct questions like that you get a direct answer. And we tried this horse, and my coach had called about him, I had called about him, we'd literally asked every question, we'd been really honest about me, she'd been really honest. And I got on and we were riding and he started head shaking, and I was like, oh, does he do this? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, just in the summer, thinking like maybe it's just pollen, maybe he's just a bit anxious. She was like, no, all year round. And I was like, right, so he's a head shaker. That is a vice that you should have probably told us. And again, that was split opinion. I've had head shakers on loan before, but like, that's not what I was looking for.
No.
And not what I wanted to purchase.
Going down that route, you know, in my experience of horses that shake their head, they're in pain somewhere. It's normally like a result of something else. That's quite common in horses, is that like what you see is actually secondary. It's like ulcers, that is secondary. There's no such thing as a horse just appearing with ulcers. That doesn't happen. They have to be stressed in some way. So, and stress doesn't necessarily just mean like travelling or excessive exercise. It could mean pain in the body. It could mean it's food deprivation, it could be separation anxiety. Like, there's so many different things. Badly fitting tack, not being trained in the way that they desire, being, you know, there's so many different reasons why horses can get ulcers. But it's the same thing with head shaking. Like, I've had a horse that was a head shaker. It wasn't my own, it was a client's horse. It had foot pain, front foot pain, and that was its way of showing it, because it was bilaterally lame in front. So yeah, it's complicated. I could put anyone off buying a horse, to be honest. It's minefield, you know. It's really complicated, and it's such a difficult thing to kind of navigate, because it's an animal, and I think that's what it's so difficult. It's not like buying a car that you can MOT. Like, of course you can have a horse vetted, but also vettings are open to opinion. They're an opinion-based thing. One horse will pass a vet with one vet will pass one horse, and a different vet will not pass the same horse. So it's very, like, you have to be also really careful of thinking, okay, what do I need this horse to be able to do? Because, for example, Harley, he maybe wouldn't have, if I had turned up and said I want a 2-star event horse, that he wouldn't have fit that bill. He wouldn't maybe have done that job. And it's important to really have clear in yourself, what do you want this horse that you're looking to purchase, what do you want that horse to be able to get to do? And not necessarily right now, but maybe, you know, your slightly bigger goal, like, you know, for you, we haven't discussed your goals, but maybe, you know, you want to go and do some little one-day events or something fun like that. Exactly. But you're not like, oh my God, I want to jump a newcomers, like jump 1 meter 10. Like, I'm not interested. That's not necessarily what you want to do. So it's kind of, establishing your goals and your like hopes, and then working out what sort of situation will fit into that with a horse, I think is really an important step, because then that will help you narrow down your wish list as such.
Yeah.
And your like yeses and nos, you know, or no. What's the word to say there? Like your hard stops?
Yeah, or your like must-haves, I guess.
Yeah, and the things you will be okay with and the things you won't be okay with.
Well, I'd love to I really want to touch on red flags at viewings for sellers and buyers, because I think that's really interesting. And then I want us to talk about green flags, and I want to talk about, for example, Harley's viewing and that, because I think it's good to have the balance of both. But like, yeah, red flag for me as a viewer, no water, no hay, massive red flag. Do not like that. And if dealers do that, some dealers, not all. Because it makes them a bit more subdued, your horses. Don't like it when you turn up and they're already tacked up, red flag. You should be, and you may have to preface this beforehand, because, you know, dealers are people too, they're busy, but it's important that you say when you're on the phone, I would love to see them tacked up, or I would like to tack them up, whichever, so that you see them before they get their tack put on, because that's a great moment to see if the horse is responding in a negative way to any little moments.
Yeah.
And I think you just get a vibe. Like, look, everyone's busy, everyone has off days, not everyone's going to get on, but you do get a vibe if people are being cagey and they're trying not to answer your questions. I think you should, at any point in a viewing, feel very comfortable being like, I think we're going to leave it there. I have turned up on a yard before with my coach. We went down his back. There was a massive scar, kissing sign scar, that hadn't been disclosed. We asked what it was. They acted like they didn't know, never seen it before. And we were like, thank you so much, we're just going to leave it there. You don't have to be impolite, but you also don't have to continue for the next hour and a half.
And you don't have to ride a horse that doesn't want to be ridden.
Or that you think, actually, this is too much. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes as well, as someone who has sold horses, it's really important. Like, I used to sell horses a lot. When I was younger, that was actually like how I made a living. So I took on a barn when I was 18, and to pay the bills I would have some horses from somebody locally who, turns out, she was giving me the ones she couldn't sell. Charming. I have got some funny stories about that situation. Like, I had one little horse, his name was Lenny, and he was so sweet. He was a little thoroughbred, and he turned up and he was riddled with lice. So like, I basically became like a little rescue, essentially, and I actually turned out to be quite good at it. I would, like, you know, make them all healthy for a little while, and then I would advertise them for not very much money. I was just making a little bit more than what she needed to sell them. And I did find some lovely little horses, some lovely homes. We had this one pony, I think her name was Savannah, and she was brown and white, and she had a little parrot mouth, so her little front teeth stuck over her bottom teeth like this. And she was really, really sweet, and she was like a lovely little children's pony, and she was really good on the lead rein, and that was what she was advertised for. Anyway, this lady comes and sees her, and she was only a tiny petite adult, so she had ridden her, and she was like, yeah, actually she would be really suitable for what we want. I think she's really nice. Anyway, we're putting her back in the stable, and she just she said, oh, I just want to just go say bye to her. And she just went in the stable, and Savannah turned around and bit her on the face.
Oh my God.
And she didn't buy her. Unsurprising. Absolutely ludicrous. I was like, I'm really sorry. Don't know why that happened. I think Savannah was probably done with her, wasn't she, that day? She thought, get out, woman, you're done. I'm done with you. But yeah, I learnt a lot in those years of selling horses, and I started actually then working with like difficult horses as well. So then people would send me the horses that they couldn't sell. And so I started with very little knowledge, just I was good at riding, basically. I got to a point where I was just like, yeah, fixing really tricky horses and then trying to find them nice homes. And I did remarkably well, considering the disastrous state that some of these horses were in. But it was, yeah, a very interesting learning experience. And one thing I really learned was the term placing horses. And I think this is something that I do agree with now, because I don't sell horses anymore. You couldn't pay me enough money to do so. I find it very difficult to see animals as a commodity at all, and for them to be, used for financial gain in that respect. Like I get it, like that's a big part of how a lot of people make money, and maybe this will be a controversial standpoint on it, but I really don't think it's good to just sell horses to anybody, you know, just to the highest bidder, essentially. I think that horses deserve to be placed, and for there to be an agreement in place where the seller has a say in whether the person chooses to purchase that horse or not. Because I remember when I was really young and I worked for someone, and we had this a little thoroughbred for sale. Actually, her name was Baby, not joking, actually called Baby. And somebody was very uninventive when she was born, weren't they? It's like the kind of situation where someone asked their kid to name it, you know. I'll call it Baby. And she was really, really straightforward. Like, she was actually a really, really nice little horse. But I remember this family came to see her, and I told you about this the other day, Rhian. You didn't know what I was talking about, but maybe some people will. But this girl, she turned up in stylo riding boots. Have you looked them up since I told you?
What you meant. Yeah, I know what you mean now. The plastic ones.
Yeah, so they're like they look like a riding boot, like a leather riding boot, but they're actually made out of rubber, and they squeak so bad on a saddle, like arr, 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 arr. And I remember I was 17 years old, right, and they turned up, and I was left to deal with this viewing myself because I'd been the one riding this horse. My boss wasn't even there at this point, and these people turned up, and I was thinking, there's no way that that's going to work. Like, I really don't think that this is going to be okay. And we got to the mounting block, and the girl didn't pick up her reins. That's a real, like, riding school thing. If you don't know to collect your reins first, you're used to having someone hold them.
Yeah.
And I said to her, how experienced are you? You know, how much have you been riding? And she said, by this point, she still stood on the mounting block. She didn't even get on the horse. And she said, I've actually only been riding for 3 months or something. And I said, I'm really sorry. This just isn't going to be the right horse for you. And she looked at me, and her mum looked at me, and I said, I don't think we've quite aligned here, and I don't think this is going to work. And they went home, and that was fine. And they were a bit put out, but at the same time, I didn't put the horse in any danger, and I didn't put the child in any danger, and the whole situation was fine. But I think that's not that common, maybe, and I've maybe always been a bit forthright with it and thought, okay, I'm putting the horse first in this situation. So yeah, I think placing horses is a good wording to use when it comes to this. Much like your situation with Harley, you know, the person obviously felt like you were a really good match, and you went back a couple of times, didn't you, to make sure that you were happy?
Yeah, well, firstly, like, when you talk about the viewing experience, I think for amateur riders, maybe not for everyone, but if you're like me and you protect your confidence and, you whatever, then viewing horses is really scary, and getting on horses you don't know is scary, and it can knock your confidence. Like, I remember when you were with me that day, you were like, are you still breathing up there? Because I just got on and was a bit like, even though he hadn't done anything. And I should say, I really think it's a good idea if you're in between horses to just have lessons. Like, I had a jump lesson a couple of days before I viewed Harley, because I knew I wanted to jump him, obviously, and I knew it would be in front of a professional show jumper, and I was like, I just have to jump a horse before I go. And yeah, so we knew about Harley through a friend who knew the seller, which is always nice that you have a kind of connection. And I'd called up about him, got some details, and then my coach had called, and she'd sort of presented who I was, what the yard was like, the setup, and sort of, we'd been honest. Like, it's not about being self-deprecating, but we'd been very honest about where I was, but the setup and the support that I had. And she actually couldn't come with me on the day of my viewing, so I went by myself, and they were just, like, so lovely. Like, I arrived, they're in the stable with him, he's not tacked up. I got to go over and, like, watch them tack him up. I actually got him trotted up first. I went and checked over his body, got him trotted up, took videos, watched him tack up, and then watched Dan ride him in the school, walk, trot, canter, jumping a couple of things. And Dan's like, is there anything you want to see? And I can't remember if I had a couple of things I wanted him to do. But he just sort of explained what he was like while he was riding. And then I got on, wearing my body protector, I should say. I don't like getting on horses I don't know without one. And I think that can be a real difficulty for people. They feel very amateurish when they turn up at a viewing with a body protector. And that can be really difficult for people. And what I will say is, if that person is really a professional, They don't give a shit. They don't care. Or, I mean, yes, it tells them that maybe you are like protecting your confidence or whatever. But if you've been honest anyway about what level you're at, this should not be surprising. And it really, it shouldn't bother them. It didn't bother Dan. He never said anything. He doesn't seem to care. So I got on him, walk, trot, canter, jumped a couple of things, and oh my goodness, the first couple of jumps I did were absolutely shocking. I mean, when I say I missed the stride and didn't save up, it was horrific. Like, they were only small, but like, let's say I did not set him up for success. But poor little Harley, he's a 5-year-old. He was quite tense. He was very up when I first bought him, and like, yeah, so he had a little moment when we were on the flat where he kind of couldn't get he couldn't get the right canter lead, and he kind of got a bit flustered, and I just like stopped him and gave him a little cuddle on the neck and was like, it's all right, let's try again. And I think later, when Dan was speaking to my coach on the phone, he was like, I just think that they're really good for each other. Like, they seem to really like gel. I think she's really good for him. And that was really nice. So even though I completely messed it up, I didn't feel self-conscious because Dan had already known what level I was at and that I was a little bit out of practice. And so he just immediately stepped in and started coaching, which is like amazing. It's perfect. And that's what I think that's a really good thing to say to people when you go to viewings. It's like, if you feel like I should be doing anything, or, you know, anything that they really like, just let me know, because that takes the pressure off you. So yeah, my coach went back. Oh, at the end of that viewing, I walked him up the road, I hacked him out on my own, which is always nice if they let you do that. I turned him around like 4 times on the road. I was like, turned around, walked, turned around again, walked, turned around again, walked, just to see. And he didn't do anything. He was so sweet. And on the way back, I was walking, and it was that moment where you're by yourself. And I remember thinking, like, how do I feel when I ride him? What do I feel about, to your point, the potential? I loved his paces. I thought his attitude was so nice. He like really wanted to work. He was like tried really hard, was so sweet and kind. And I felt like a little bit nervous because he was young, but I felt nervous in the excited sense. I was like, oh yeah, I'm really excited to learn with my coach. And so that was a good one. And then, yeah, I had a vetting, x-rayed basically everything because I was so paranoid after my previous horse, which we'll get into another day. And then, yeah, I think my coach said she had a call with Dan, like quite a long call, where he was basically weighing up a couple of riders that he really liked. To your point, he really wanted to be involved in the decision. Wow. And she and him had a proper chat about like the setup and the yard. And he said to her, like, you know, if you weren't there, the coach, I probably wouldn't sell him to her, and I wouldn't have bought him either. And so I think, you know, it was really obvious he wanted him to go to the right home. And even at the vetting, like, they were like giving him kisses on his nose, which is like so not what you see. And the week he arrives, like, Dan checked in, not just on the day to be like, has he arrived? Is he dead? Is he fine? Like, which is, you know, for some people what they need to do. Checked in again a couple of days later, a week later. Occasionally I'll send him something and he'll be like, I'm so glad. I sent him a video of us jumping recently because it was like a big moment. And he was like, I'm so glad you bought him. And like, that's people who like, they really do care where the horse goes.
And that is the thing, isn't it? There are lots of people out there who do a wonderful job of finding horses homes. And, you know, there are some people out there who don't do that. And maybe we could talk about my more recent purchase of a horse, the last horse I bought, and the experience that I had with that. Because then there's the other flip side of the coin, where there's a lot of really not good things going on. And it's very, very sad. And I think makes me lose faith in the horse world a bit when I see that side of it. But I think that the coin is turning. I don't know if that's the phrase, but things are shifting. Tides are turning. There you go. This is going to become the podcast known for having the most rubbish phrases that
the
don't
worst
mean anything.
Idioms.
The idioms, that's
Wrong
it. The
idioms
idioms in the wrong places. So, yeah, it can be what that sounds like such a wonderful experience that you had, and I'm so glad that is out there for people to hear, because it does mean it's possible. And it really, I think as well, it comes back to like, they knew him really well and they knew what would really work for him, and that shows the testament of like, they took the time to learn and they took the time to understand him, because they were people selling him on behalf of his owner, right?
Yeah,
so yeah, so they would have taken the time to get to know him, to give him knowledge and information, and then to find him a lovely home, which they did. Yay. Yeah. So the last horse that I bought was Blondie.
Oh, Blondie.
And So I'll tell you the story of Blondie briefly. So when Blondie was 4 years old, a friend of mine rang me up and said, I've got this really complicated horse. I want your help. I want you to do some of your like rope halter groundwork with her. I don't know what to do. She's extremely reactive. She squeals at me all the time. She won't go forwards. Okay. So I was like, okay, she can come for training. So she came for training for about 6 weeks, and I did get her going really nicely, and I was, you know, very in love with her. She was very complicated. She was very peculiar at that time still, when I knew her then. And I had just bought Zora. I bought her from a sales, actually, from an auction, which was a really fun, exciting experience. Definitely not one I would repeat, because it was actually terrifying, but it was fun at the time. But it meant I didn't have any money in my pocket, right? I'd just spent a fair amount of money buying Zora. And my friends came back to me and she said, look, this isn't really a horse for me. She rides professionally. She's a show jumper, a really good one, and really kind and, you know, lovely. She said, she's not really a horse for me. I think I'm going to move her on. Do you want to buy her? And I said, I'm really sorry, I can't do that. And she said, okay. She had her home for a while, and then in the end she did fight. She part exchanged her, I think, with another horse. It was I don't know the ins and outs of it, but she kept me up to date. She told me what happened, and I was like, okay, fine. At the time, I had an owner, and I'll tell you this because this is a bit spooky. Obi's owner, she was a bit spooky sometimes. She would predict dressage scores to the number. So she'd be like, you got 72.2%, and I'd be like, yeah, okay. And then I did every time, like quite often. And there was no online. She wasn't checking online first now at this point. That didn't exist back then. So she was quite, just had intuition, I think. And she said to me, she said, I really need you not to worry about this because Blondie's going to come back one day. And I was like, okay, if you say so. Because at this point, I didn't even know where she was. Anyway, it went on and years went past, and I had somebody reach out to me at one point and say, oh, do you know this horse? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, I've got her on loan or something. She's having some rest in the field. And I was like, okay. I couldn't do anything about it. There was no space option opened. Anyway. Then a couple of years later, Blondie at this point would have been 7, turning 8. My friend sent me a picture of a horse and said, I think this is Blondie. And I said, oh gosh, yes. And the advert...
Blondie's quite distinctive to look at.
Very distinctive. So she's chestnut with a flaxen mane and tail. She's a very beautiful girl. She's got these huge beguiling eyes. She's like looks into your soul, and then she's got these enormous ears. And
she's tall. She's very tall.
Yeah, so. She's 17 hands, so she's like a big, broad, beautiful Belgian warm blood she is. And the advert read, pig looking for a sty. And she was being advertised as a broodmare, I think. Or maybe the advert was pretty horrific. It said all sorts of really unpleasant things in it. And she was advertised by one of the most notoriously bad dealers in the UK. I won't mention any names, of course. I'm not here to slander people, but it was, yeah, horrid. So that was on a Tuesday evening. I sent them a message on Facebook, and I said, I'd like to buy this horse. I'll come and pick her up tomorrow. Will you accept this amount of money? Like £3,000. Literally, she was advertised for basically nothing. Bear in mind, she's a 7-year-old warm blood with really good blood, like breeding. But obviously advertised as a horse that could hardly be ridden. And the video that they posted was her being ridden in spurs and a big pelham and a grackle and a whip. And she was swishing her tail like it was propelling her along. And she looked so miserable. And the woman said, yeah, basically. So that was fine. And so me and George, my fiancé, we drove the next day, very first thing in the morning. I had a panic attack that night. My anxiety spiked terribly and I spent the night vomiting, which is what happens when I get really anxious. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Because it was a big decision and it was quite like a knee-jerk reaction. Like I was just like, yes, I'm just going to buy this horse. I hadn't really thought it through. But I also didn't feel like I could not do it, because I'd loved her before and I knew her so well. And I thought the cycle has got to stop. This horse can't keep having homes. Anyway, I purchased Blondie. I went and picked her up. I posted on my social media that I had done so. And I had quite a few messages from quite a few people about the stories of what this horse had been through. She had had 5 homes in the last 2 weeks before I bought her. She had been passed from one person to the next person to the next person to the next person, and each one of those people maybe thought they were doing right by her. I don't know. The person who had owned her most recently, actually I knew, weirdly, and had not seen her. Like, I knew her, I follow her on Instagram, and I hadn't seen her. And it was just bonkers. Like, that I found another advert for her from a fortnight prior with another rider, with her being forced to jump around a big course of fences, again swishing her tail. She looked kind of lame in one of the flatwork videos. It was really bad, and it just all started coming out of the woodwork. This horse had just been passed pillar to post because she's big and beautiful and blonde and just a potential, you know, everybody kind of felt like they could get their pound of flesh, right, and make their buck or whatever it might be. And I was like, no, I'm enough. I'm not having it. I'm not letting her be passed along. And she has a lot of trauma. She is a very complicated horse. She has lots of different things going on in her body that make her complicated. She has something called PSSM, which is polysaccharide storage myopathy. It's where the horse doesn't produce or process sugar properly, and it's like a muscle dysfunction. They can tie up, like get azoturia. It can cause all sorts of different things. Maybe we'll talk about it one day. It's a complicated scientific thing. But I think that was like the darkest end of selling horses story that I can find, and I will never sell a horse again. I really won't. Me and my partner even spoke the other day about if something really bad happened to me, what would happen to my horses. And, you know, it's a bit of a grim topic, but I thought I need to understand that. And I have places where I think that they would go if something bad did happen to me. You know, friends who I know would accept Blondie for who she is and never try to make her do something that she didn't or couldn't do. But yeah, I think I've gone really full circle with it in terms of, like, I sold horses a lot. I did my best, but now I'm like, absolutely no. I don't agree with it. I find it very difficult and very complicated.
Whenever I've heard that story a few times now, obviously, but every time you tell it, it makes me sad. Like, my eyes were welling up. Like, I just can't believe she was described that way. And luckily, we don't see as much. I haven't seen as much of that in the last couple of years, but of course it's there. But it does make me think about, because I think we've all been there. We've all got a really big hearts. We love horses, where you've been on the buying side and you can't buy, or you're thinking about buying a horse maybe for the wrong reasons. I remember before I bought Harley, my first horse, Woody, I bought him when he was 8, and he had a very complicated, very traumatic injury in the field, and I tried to rehab him for about a year, and I couldn't get him sound enough to retire, and I had to have him put to sleep. That is the short version, because I can't get into the long version without crying. And I was absolutely heartbroken, and it wasn't until like months later that I started looking for another horse. And I came across this horse who actually Miri and I both knew, and he was so lovely. He was this big Irish draft. He was 5 years old, really similar to Harley in many ways. And I went and tried him, and I really, really liked him. But he had this one particular thing that he really struggled with behaviourally. And I kind of went back and forth on it with my coach. And we were having this conversation on the phone one day, and she said, "Can I just tell you something?" And I was like, yeah. And she was like, "I still think you're really heartbroken over Woody. And I feel like you think that you could save this horse, and like maybe he could save you." And it was like, it makes me cry now, because at the time I was so heartbroken, and I was just looking literally looking to save a horse, because I felt like that would fill the hole. And it's a really important thing to recognise, and having someone who can see that, I think, is really important, because sometimes you go looking for something in particular, and then you end up looking at the horses that you think, just like, I'm not saying he was a rescue case, he absolutely wasn't, he was fabulous, and he's actually loving life now in a very different space, but I think sometimes you can waver because your heart tells you to do something, and that's very difficult.
Did I tell you that I heard from that horse?
No, I knew that
I'll tell you I will tell you the story of this. So I had a horse in for training. He wasn't suitable for the person that he was owned by, so he was sold through me. and that was a case of placing him. We were very careful. This lovely person bought him, and then not long after, I heard that he wasn't having a good time, and he had ended up deciding that he was going to sell the horse. And I was quite shocked, because we had really good time with this horse. He was in a really solid place. Like, he was like a darling when he was with us. And then he was at the place where you had tried him, right?
Yeah.
So you tried him.
I
and it was a place where you'd had some lessons, right?
Yeah, so I'd been having lessons with someone, as I said, in between viewings, and then I suddenly saw that he posted this horse on Facebook, and I was like, and his name's quite distinctive, and so I was like, I sent it to Miri and was like, is this that horse? Because we talked about him before you sold him, because I almost thought about getting him, but it was too early after Woody, and I wasn't in a place to do it, and so it was really odd that he'd like reappeared. So then I went to try him, and he was lovely and everything. So yeah.
And then I didn't hear about the situation for a long time, but he disappeared off this gentleman's Facebook, the guy that was selling him, the one who retried him with. Just disappeared. And then not long ago, I received a message from the person who I had sold him to, through, like, I was the agent as such, saying, I just wanted to let you know that me and we found our way, and we are having the most amazing time, and I just put in a lot of training and had a lot of help, and I just wanted to say thank you, and you always believed in him as being a wonderful horse, and I can see that now, and I didn't have enough help at the beginning, and I'm sorry that I had made a problem, and because they came back to me and said, oh, he's doing this, that and the other, and I was like, I don't know why he's doing that, it's not the same. I think it was to do with the saddle, to be honest. They hadn't had a saddle anyway. The whole thing, all's well that ends well, basically. And you didn't buy him for a reason, because he needed to find his way back and to find his way through that thing. So a wonderful story about a lovely, lovely horse who was very, very special to us when he was in with us for training. We need to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our podcast today. Premier Performance have been a supporter of mine for a long time. I have been using their calming cookies over the years for intermittent use when it comes to things like travel and maybe hacking, like I spoke about in last week's podcast. Calming cookies are a magnesium-free way of giving your horse an extra bit of support in a stressful situation. So thank you so much, Premier Performance, for giving us this opportunity to sponsor our podcast and support us on this venture.
Quickly on vettings and signing a horse over, I don't know if that's it. So like you found the horse you like as I said, there are many types of vettings you can do. You can do no vetting. You can do a two-stage
no vetting, like I did with Blondie. I literally picked her up, and I remember the day when I got there, and I thought to myself, no matter what state this horse is in, there's no way. The woman was like, do you want to see her trot up? I was like, if you want, but I don't really care. If she's lame, I'm buying her anyway. I'm not about to start haggling. I've paid you the money. So just put the horse in the horse box, basically. I remember she even had a coffee, like a paper cup in her stable. Her stable was so disgusting. There was like a rug on the floor, cup on the floor. I was like, just get us out of here as quickly as you possibly can. Anyway, yes, vettings, go on. Because you did a lot, didn't you, with Harley? And I wanted to share my 2 pennies worth on vettings.
Yes, I did. So when I bought Woody, I did a 2-stage vetting. And I guess the context with Woody is I didn't x-ray. And if I had x-rayed, Woody was great. He passed the vetting for what I needed and everything. But, go on.
Did you not do a 5-stage where he was ridden?
Oh, sorry. I did do a 5-stage.
Yeah.
What am I talking about?
So
sorry, I did a 5-stage.
Let's maybe explain 2-stage and 5-stage.
I don't know why I said that. Yeah, I did do a 5-stage.
So a 2-stage is they have flexion tests, they lunge on the hard and the soft, and they have their eyes, their heart, and their lungs listened to. And that is it. That's basically, so if you were vetting a 3-year-old, for example, that's unridden, you would probably have a 2-stage with x-rays potentially. But a 5-stage is they have a ridden element, they are then cantered, and they're like cantered quite hard, and so you listen to their breathing after exercise, and they will quite often flexion test prior to exercise and post exercise, or maybe just look at them trot up pre and post exercise. It's pretty brutal. You've got to be very sound to go through that, and a lot of horses will have something on a vetting.
And with 5 stages, you can then add x-rays on top. And it gets complicated because depending on how much you're spending on a horse, there are some, in fact most actually, insurance companies now, over a certain threshold, I think it's 10k, won't insure a horse without a 5 stage, and sometimes for a specific number if it goes beyond that without specific x-rays. And it's not, people talk about horses failing vettings, it's not that they necessarily fail. I mean, there are things that are sometimes very black and white, but often it's is the horse suitable for the level of work you want it to do, and then it becomes a decision by the owner, by the viewer, of like whether they want to buy the horse.
Yeah, and it's like a discussion point, isn't it? It's like an open,
exactly.
like, I found that this horse was 1/10 lame on flexion behind after exercise. Now that would be something that for me would be like, you know, okay, I would like to understand maybe why that would be. Maybe then you would go down the x-ray route. But it's that sort of, it, again, horse detective mode goes on, and it's that like, how much information can I gain about this horse before I spend all of my savings on it? Because it might not mean that you say, no, I'm not going to buy it because it has got X, Y, or Z that has come up on the vetting, but it means that you have that tangible information, that you know what you're going to do with it. You can say to yourself, okay, I'm aware the foot balance is really bad in front. I'm going to do something about that. I know I've spoken with the vet. I can do something about that. Because we're not vetting bicycles. Oh, if only. You know, it's not like, oh, it's got a flat tyre. It's like, it's an animal that's lived a life. It was a foal. It had bent legs as a foal, and they've not totally, you know, it's got a conformational defect or whatever it might be. And it's so, you know, common that vettings are quite, you know, it's like really black and white line, and that's not the case. It can't be. It's very grey. Very grey. 50 Shades of Grey horse.
So I 5 staged Woody, and I did an x-ray, and I remember the day before I vetted him, Miri was like, are you sure you don't want to do front foot x-rays? And I was like, well, I'm going to see how the 5 stage goes, famous last words. And I was like, if the vet thinks I should x-ray the front feet, I'll x-ray the front feet. I didn't, and I love Woody. I regret nothing about owning that horse. He was an absolute darling from the day he arrived to the day he left. But if I had x-rayed, I would have found significant side bone in both of his front feet and hock arthritis, significant hock arthritis in both of his hocks as an 8-year-old. And, you know, I spoke to the vet about this afterwards, you know, years after, and she was like, you know, that can just happen from being born outside, which he was born like out, and, you know, it just happens. And so, you know, that caused huge problems for him. He had a random accident in the field, as it always seems to be, and his side bone fractured at the base, but it was such a big crack that it went all the way down through the pedal bone, and he never recovered from it. Like, I remember taking him to Lip Hook, and the sort of one of the best vets there trotted him up and was like, I cannot believe how sound he is given what I can see on the x-ray. And I was like, oh, you know, my vet was quite hopeful, and he was like, I'm going to be honest, I would be really surprised. I would just, like, you know, dampen that hope. And that was 3 months in, and we tried for like a year. I can go into it another day. But post all of that, I was then very paranoid. So even though Harley was 5, and even though we were never going to the Olympics, I just, like, I could not buy a horse without doing x-rays. And I budgeted for that, and I x-rayed everything, actually. Everything my vet would x-ray.
Yeah, and I think the relevance here is that those two things together are relevant.
Yes.
So hock x-rays, one thing, medicatable, manageable, caring for the horse's body, you can feed them appropriately. You know, it's quite common that horses have changes in the hocks. It's not an uncommon thing. And I just want to preface this by saying, don't come at us in the comments, because what Rhi's vet meant was that could be one of the reasons why he had hock arthritis by being born outside. But there's so many reasons why that can happen. But the issue that
loads of things.
The issue that Woody had was that because he had the hock arthritis from very early on, he overloaded his front feet, and so that's why he had the development of the very significant side bone. So then you get this horse that is trying not to put the front weight on his hind end, so he's putting it on his front feet too much, and then the front feet take more of the strain. And because the hock arthritis wasn't known about before she bought him, it meant that that wasn't then managed, that meant that then the injury potentially occurred. So it's like that, if you know this information, you maybe would do things differently, and that's all we're trying to say, you know. So
absolutely.
for me, go on.
Well, if I'd have looked properly at his conformation, like you said, this was all down to how he held himself. He was very asymmetric. When I MRI'd him as part of this injury management, I mean, it was like a shopping list. Navicular, everything. It was awful, and that was a lot down to foot conformation and probably why the side bone developed in the first place. So again, like, it's not like we were looking for stunningly clean x-rays. Everyone's seen that article that's like, don't buy the horse, not the x-rays. It's more just like, what does this tell me about the horse and the way that they carry themselves, and is there anything I need to help them with?
Absolutely. I mean, to talk about side bone. Side bone is a really common thing, and my own horse, Mo, she's retired now because she's 20, but she had a very long career, and she was diagnosed with side bone when she was about 9, and I met a podiatrist at her first aid course randomly, an equine podiatrist, and she was like, because we were just talking about our horses, and I said, I've got this horse and it's this, that and the other, and I've been struggling with her being a bit lame in front, and I said she's been diagnosed with side bone and I don't know what to do about it, and she said, you should try taking her shoes off. My vet told me to put her to sleep, by the way, because he said that I was probably never going to get to where I wanted to get to, and she said you should take her shoes off, and this was the start of barefoot horses for me, and none of my horses wear shoes now, and I'm very pro barefoot for lots of different reasons. We'll get onto that another topic again one day. We're really setting ourselves up today, aren't we? Planting lots of little seeds for future podcasts, but she supported me through that, and Mo went back jumping 140s. So what we're saying is, information is so important when you're buying a horse. If you want your horse to do a proper job, and when I say proper job, I mean a prelim. I don't necessarily mean jumping in the Olympics. I mean competing at a low level. You probably want to be saving £1,000 in your budget is to go and vet that horse, because that £1,000 could save you a lot of money down the line buying a horse for £5,000. Even if the horse is £5,000 and you spend £1,000 on the vetting, you can save yourself a lot of money and potentially a lot of heartache, because you maybe would have still bought him but done something about it, changed the way you did things. It may have still had the same ending, I don't know, but hindsight.
Yes, so vettings. The other thing I think when you're buying a horse is get a receipt. And this can be handwritten. Most of them, I've bought 2 horses, but they've both been handwritten receipts that just say, so-and-so has bought so-and-so, microchip number XYZ, looks like this. So just get a receipt. And then I think MiRhi will have thoughts on when they arrive home, but like, give them a few days. For the love of God, they are a pony. They don't know where they've gone. Oh, MiRhi has thoughts. I'll finish.
Keep going, you're good.
Like, they have moved probably twice, because they've probably gone to a seller's yard and then yours, so they have no idea that this is the place they're going to stay. They've probably changed feed, smells, friends, routine. Everything is different. All the people around them. And I think there is a balance between, like, getting them going with work, not just letting them go feral. Not that, I don't know if that's the right phrase, really, but I also think, like, give them grace. Like, they are animals trying their best to just exist.
And that is, what I was going to say was, it's important to give them the opportunity to take a breath, so to land, you know. So getting them to a point where they have a bit of a routine as a horse, so you start making sure that their needs are met. That's really important early on. But for the love of, please, it's not English, don't not ride them for 2 weeks, or don't not interact with them for 2 weeks, and then ring up the person that you purchased them for and say, excuse me, they bucked me off. The key is to maybe have a practice from the ground that allows you to let them, there's a word I'm looking for but I can't find it, not initiate, like show them around, essentially, the place that they're going to be living, but in a positive way.
Show them the school.
Yeah, exactly. So the groundwork practice that I work with, you know, we have them in the rope halter, and we can basically go into the arena and show them the arena, but in a way that is positive for their body. So you create shape in the body, you move their body in a positive way, and it gives them this opportunity to sort of see the world from a nice perspective while still allowing them some information being given to their body. Because if you leave a horse to its own devices, it will make up a survival guide of its own, and we as their humans need to be part of their herd, and we need to show them a survival guide that is going to be helpful and beneficial to them. And I think that's the best way you can look at it. So if you've bought a horse and they have been in work 5 days a week and they are a competition horse, or they are quite well fit, they're quite fit and well and whatever, if you just suddenly give them time off and then ride them 2 weeks later, that's not going to be the same horse that you bought. So, you know, making sure that you're really having things in place, getting the saddler organised for when you're getting, when they're first arriving, making sure they're up to date with things like their teeth, if there's any question marks from the vetting, that kind of thing is really important, so that then you have the opportunity to start interacting with that horse in a safe way, rather than waiting and then having a problem. So I think that's definitely important. We didn't go over green flags just before we get on to something else, and there were just a couple that I thought was really important, and one of them is going back to the vet situation, is if you ask for vet history, that it is openly given. There is a bit of a legal thing with that you have the right to ask for the vet history, and if they are really cagey about that, then I would be.
And important to not mistake trying to be legally correct for being cagey, because, for example, you can't call up their vet and just get the history. They have to get permission from the owner to give you the vet history. So make sure that you're not misinterpreting them being on the right side of the law with caginess. But yes, if they won't give you the vet history, flag.
I mean, in terms of behaviour, green flag would be things like they stand at the mounting block with a very soft neck. And I mean, what I mean by that is, we'd call it tubular. So if you can imagine a horse kind of fits into a toilet roll cardboard, and their neck looks sort of open and soft, like they've got this is a better way of describing it, that they've got a U-shaped curve under their neck rather than a V-shaped curve under their neck. So like,
you've lost me again.
So where the head and the neck join, if that's a V shape and it's very angular, then the tension is at the base of the neck. Because if the
you're pulling your neck up and back just for
so I'm tucking my chin into my chest, that would be a V-shaped neck, and then I'm extending my neck out. You can hear me doing a weird voice. That would be a U-shape.
She looks like a tortoise.
I look like a tortoise reaching for a lettuce. That would be a U-shaped neck, and if the horse stands nicely at the mounting block, doesn't look stressed, that would be a really nice green flag. That would be something where I'd say, okay, that horse is really yesing to being ridden. That's not English either. The horse is saying yes to being ridden. It's saying yes to being tacked up. It's saying yes to all of those things. If they're a big hard nose going on, then that's where you would say, okay, maybe this horse has some questions around the tack or whatever, and that goes back to then, is it because the tack isn't so good? Is it maybe because the horse is looking a little bit under-muscled in certain areas? Or is it because actually this horse looks really uncomfortable and we've got a bit of a red, there's that then a red flag. So
yeah. And to your point around the first week, I highly recommend an equine MOT. I've done it with the only two horses I've bought, but I think it's great. Farrier/podiatrist, physio, dentist, saddle fitter, bridle fitter, just like get those things checked. Even if they are fine and you don't need them, at least you've done it and you can say that you've set that horse up for success comfort wise. And also keeping them on the same routine. The reason, fun fact, that Harley is out overnight all year round now is because when I bought him in October, he was out overnight with the seller's yard, and when we asked for his routine, we asked what he was eating, so he hopped on the lorry about 2 p.m. By 4 p.m. he was out in a field because we wanted to keep him on the same routine. We introduced him to our lovely quiet friend, just one friend, just to keep things very, chilled, and they had a lovely evening out, and he seemed to love it, and we just kind of kept going. And we kept the same feed, the same bit for a little while, and then we ended up changing the bit to something else. But, sort of easily, bringing them in easy things.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think it's important, isn't it, to really understand and ask those questions to make sure that then you feel like things, and that they're very forthcoming with that information as well. Definitely.
Okay.
Does that bring us on to our question of the week?
Yeah. Gosh, there's one lady who DM'd us who said that she wished that our podcasts were longer for her runs, so I hope that you're delighted that we're at the
She's probably now dead up a hill somewhere, like, God, stop talking, women, we're done. I need to stop running.
How do you remember that, you stalker?
Yeah. By the way, we do love to hear from you, and we've had so many lovely messages about the podcast, and I had, some, like, if you leave us a review on the streaming platform that you listen on, we really like that. We also, if you can, like, give us a little star rating, open to you. You
preferably
can choose,
5.
Preferably 5. We did receive a 1 star, and I got very upset, and I thought somebody had written something bad, and I'd had a bad dream about it, and anyway, Amy and Rhi have put my mind at rest and told me it's ridiculous. But we have had some lovely comments, so please do give us a follow. That really helps us, and then give us a like, or a little 5 star.
You're allowed to hate listen to, I guess, but if you've got this far through, I'm going to suggest that you're probably a fan. So,
and if you're hate listening to, that's okay, because you're just bumping up the numbers regardless. So welcome.
Question of the week.
Question of the week. Which one are we starting with, Rhi?
I think the part loaning one was quite interesting. Should we start with that?
Okay. Hi, what would your advice be on caring for and advocating for the health and wellness of a school/lesson horse? I think this person is in America, and that's quite a common thing for people to be able to, like, lease a riding school horse, essentially. I lease a beautiful gelding from my local school. She literally just said that. Why did I say that? I'm so stupid. And would love to be able to investigate some quirks he has, and in general provide him with just some special care tailored to his needs more. But I am limited by it in the fact that I do not own him, and I cannot ensure that the care would be provided by his other riders. Any thoughts or advice would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much in advance. Rhi, have you got any take on that one? Because you have you've part-loaned horses before, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And actually, I really feel for this person. I really resonated with what she said, because that was actually the reason I stopped part loaning in the end. I just felt like I wanted to be more invested in the horse's welfare and well-being, and it's very difficult to do that in certain part loaning situations. But I think this is a very difficult one. I think there are things that any rider can do to make the welfare of their horse better. You know, when you go to have a lesson, especially if you've been there for a while and you know the horses, you can just check your tack. Does anything feel really tight? Is that flash? Does it really need to be that tight? Does that noseband need to be that tight? Just checking. If you don't feel that a horse is sound, you don't have to get on. If you don't feel that a horse has had adequate care before that lesson, you don't have to ride, and you don't have to use that establishment. We're all very powerful in, like, how we can use our money. I presume you love the yard you're at, but I think little things like that, the way you choose to ride, the way you choose to interact, you're already, like, making that horse's day better. And I don't mean that in a patronising way, but I just mean when you don't have control over that horse's whole world, you can still have an impact on their day.
Definitely. And any small amount of improvement that you can make is going to benefit that horse. I think in this situation, my advice would be to ask how much you can help. So to go to the person who is in ownership of that horse and say, hi, I would really like to advocate for this horse better. Is there a way that we could look into X, Y, or Z? I'm happy to pay for it. That would be a big step if you are feeling that you are financially willing to put forward the funds to do the steps that you're willing to take. And then potentially you could ask to speak to the other people who are leasing that horse, because I think that's quite common. It's like 2 or 3 people would, like, share one horse, and then the yard would take on the care of the horse, and then those people would come and enjoy that horse and be the people who would exercise them. So maybe you could ask to speak to them and just have an open discussion and say, these are my concerns. Please, may we do this? I'm willing to help pay for it. Would you be willing to help pay for it? You may be the only one stepping up and doing that. Maybe that would be uncomfortable, or maybe that would feel comfortable because you felt like you just wanted to do that for that horse. and just see where you get to. If you are shut down at that point, I think you have your answer as to whether you're going to be able to help more, and then you have the choice of saying whether you want to step in or step out. But I think good for you, and well done for advocating for this horse. That's really important to say, and he will be so grateful of you for noticing and caring for him in that way. And like Rhi was saying, you know, adjust your goals accordingly to what he can offer, and that's going to really help in the longer run as well, potentially.
+1.
That was a really good question. We've got another couple that actually tie in quite well together that we're going to kind of answer at the same time. Well, maybe not at the same time, but they're slightly different, but they have the similar theme. Which one do you think we should start with, Rhi?
I think the rehab one is I think the rehab one is interesting, because then the third question goes on to a long-term goal. So, hey Miri and Rhi, loving the podcast so far. Could listen to you two for hours. I feel like I'm at the end of my tether with yard owners not really having the horse's welfare as a top priority, and wanted to ask your opinion on how to handle things when you feel like your horse is getting the short straw. To preface this, I'll say that this last yard has pushed me to my limits, to the point where my partner and pets are moving further out to somewhere the horses can be at home. I'm extremely lucky to have found this property, and honestly don't know what I would do if I didn't have this route out in a few weeks. Long story short, horse has been on box rest for 2 months with hand walking daily for a tendon injury. He now has the all clear for small paddock turnout, which I was thrilled about when the walking was getting hairy, and as I am now 4 months pregnant. Congratulations. After some persuasion from me, my yard let me put up a small paddock in the small field that was advertised as a sick paddock on viewing the yard. 2 days later, I'm told I cannot use it because it's rained and he can only have supervised arena turnout at an extra cost on top of full livery. While I totally understand that it's wet at the moment and the paddock will inevitably turn to mud, our main field is a total swamp and they don't seem to mind about that, I am also stuck as to what to do with my horse, who's now had a taste of grass and a bit of freedom, but will have to go back to solid box rest and walking. How do people manage to prioritise what their horse needs when so many yards just don't support it? I'm not afraid to be straight with people and will always speak up for what my horse needs, but this often gets me into trouble as most people bow down to whatever the owner says at their horse's detriment. Is there a more tactful way to get our horses what they need? Am I being too expectant? Should I just accept what they say? If I wasn't moving, I would now be looking at him on box rest until the ground is dry, which could be months, and I'm really not sure how I would cope with that. Thanks if you got this far and understood my point. P.S. You're going to love this, Miri. I did have a shake on the way to the yard after this debate with my owner, and it must have helped because I didn't lose my cool when I got there.
Yeah, power to the somatic shaking. If you have no idea what we're talking about, listen to the first episode. Very interesting question. As a livery, what's your take?
Yes. So I've definitely been in this position where I was hand walking for a really long time, and got to a point where we were like, right, what does turnout look like? And I was really lucky that my yard owner and I kind of worked together to find, so we luckily already have like a round pen like in the field, and we had it in one place, and then the girls who work for us, the ladies who work on the yard are amazing. They ended up moving it to a different field that was more suitable, but if that hadn't been able to happen, it was in a massive field, and we moved it to a smaller field, so that the idea was, we never got to this point, but the idea was that eventually he could just be in the slightly bigger paddock that the round pen was in as a kind of transition. But I did consider like what happens if they say no, and I was looking at like other rehab yards. I was looking at other solutions, like some yards offer massive cow barns, so like your horse is on box rest but they can still move. And it was a conversation I was having. I had conversations with Miri about it, and it was one of those things where it was like, what can I afford? What is going to be good for my horse? Like, what is going to long term, like, is moving them okay? So for me, it was like, am I happy with the compromise that we've got? So I think that's the question, is like, can you find a compromise with your yard owner? Are they willing to help you? Or actually are they just like, my yard isn't set up for this, it's not the right place, and you have a frank conversation, and you have to then weigh up the stress of moving your horse with the benefit, which usually is higher, I'd say, of having a space that is adequate for rehab. But rehab is really hard to set up for, and a lot of yards are not set up for it. No. I'll just say one final point on this. There is a yard in Surrey that was like designed for rehab, and a lot of people had asked me why I didn't move from there. And the answer was that it was so far away from my house I wouldn't be able to see him every day, and I really struggled with that, with him being on box rest. So there's also those kinds of things of like interaction of the owner as well.
Absolutely. So I do offer rehab on my yard. I offer rehab livery, and but it is something that you have to be like very open about when you're first like agreeing to it. And I think the situation here is that potentially this conversation needed to be had from the yard owner's perspective to the client, to say, we are potentially going to hit turnout time when it is January and it is going to be raining a lot. We might struggle with bringing him out into the sick paddock at that time of year. And I will preface this by saying, this owner of the yard, they may not actually own the yard, they may rent it, and they may have very strict stipulations on what they are and aren't allowed to do with the grass. Now, my landlord is pretty open, and having been on my yard for a long time, I know how the grass recovers. So if, for example, I had a horse at the moment that needed to go into one of my small sick paddocks, I too have a stallion pen. It lives up and down. We move it a lot. If the horse has to go in it in the summer and the grass, there isn't lots of grass, we'll be like moving it every other day pretty much. It's a really bollocks of a job, I can't deny it, but it is a really important thing, and I'm very clear that is something I can offer, but it isn't something that if somebody rung me up right now and said, I've got a horse, if this person called me up and said, I want my horse to start small paddock turnout, I would be saying to them, I would be able to do that for you if the weather is appropriate. But the reality is I don't have a turnout pen with surface on it, so I potentially wouldn't be able to offer you what you're looking for, so I wouldn't take that client on. So I think it's the difficult balance between what is that yard owner or yard manager, are they restricted in what they can actually offer, and was that made clear? Often these situations are basically solved by communication. And it's a case of communicating at the start of the issue that at some point you may come a cropper, rather than being like, oh, now we're a cropper, whoops. And that's a bit tricky, I guess.
Yeah. That whole situation of like rehab, yard suitability kind of leads us quite nicely to the third question. And I don't know if we need to read the whole thing. I mean, you can if you want to. But it was essentially around suitability of turnout on yards and the future of, I was going to say the future of the economy, that's not right. The future of the environment.
Too deep, Reed, too deep.
Politics, economy and the environment. No, wrong podcast. The future of the environment. And this, I think, is one that Miri and I talk about a lot. And we actually want to do a whole episode on sustainability in yards and the future of yards. But I wondered if you had any immediate thoughts on the turnout challenge, because you've had mud forever and ever as a yard owner.
So we have a clayey yard, as in the ground is quite clayey, and it means that some of the fields drain quite well, some of them don't, some of them get quite poached, some of them don't. The question that we had was around, again, a communication situation. So this person is on a yard, and sometimes they will receive a message at 8 a.m. on that day that the horses are not allowed to go out in the field. So the reads like this: horses staying in today at 8 a.m. in the morning starts a really bad day for me, as I then worry that my horse is stuck in, and I wonder whether this entire winter turnout topic couldn't be managed better for horses and for owners who aren't able to get to the yard until the evening, or on some days not at all. So this person is basically being put in a position where they are out of control of the situation. Now, I, on my yard, have few but very large fields. So it means that we tend to group horses together into small herds, and then it means that they have their like specific fields. Now, I'm really conscious of horses going in the field. If I'm honest, if I never had to put a horse in a stable, or only for so they can have a sleep, then that would be my choice. Long term, I would love to have a track. I would love to be able to have a facility where horses could come and go as they please. I do believe that is the most natural way that we can keep horses. But it is expensive to set up. It is complicated. It's not that easy to do, and it takes a lot of organisation. And I think what we're probably going to see is more yards going in the direction of having hard standing areas, having areas where horses called loafing areas, where they have constant access to forage, but it's not on grass. And I think, it's a really difficult thing as someone who runs a yard to make sure that you are trying to get those horses out in the field every day as best you possibly can, but sometimes logistically it's very difficult. And my old landlord, not the one I have now, but the one who previously owned the yard that I'm currently on, he used to just shut my fields every now and then. He'd just turn around and say, you can't turn out in that field anymore. And I was like, but I can't not do that. And so the power was taken away from me, and sometimes the power is taken away from other people. I have experienced bad fields enough years in a row that I know that they always come back. Like, if you are clever and you rotate them just in the right timing, and you harrow appropriately, you roll appropriately, you reseed if you need to, you do all of those things, grass is remarkably resilient and your field can look pretty rubbish. But given the right kind of management and care, it is okay again. And so this year, what I did is I reduced the number of horses I had, and my business was still financially viable because I worked it out so that it is, I think this comes down to it a lot, is that people often have more horses than the land can support. And the reality of it is people need to put their livery price up. People need to understand their livery. If they want their horse to have all year round turnout, they like the yard, they like the facility, they like the training, whatever it might be, they may need to pay slightly more so that the owner can have less horses, the land can be less used, and then the situation can be more sustainable. And that is the reality of the situation. The reason they're probably having to close their fields is because there's too many horses. And this person also said that the management seems a little bit debatable, because one day it will say they can't go in the field because it's slightly raining, and then the next day the horse is allowed to go out for 8 hours a day. So it seems to be that maybe this person is struggling with the kind of very on-off nature of it, and what I tend to come to the compromise of, and is what this person also is hoping to come to the compromise of, is maybe the horses do get to go out every single day no matter what, but maybe for less time. And that can make a big difference. If you start getting in the habit of keeping horses in because it's raining, it can be quite easy to slip into that routine of, oh, it's raining, they're not going in the field. And then they're harder to turn out because then they don't have that freedom, and then they go more bonkers when they go in the field. So actually, the more you can turn the horse out, the less effect it is going to have on the field. Also, if they don't wear shoes, they churn the field up way less. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think long term, this pendulum could have gone in one of two ways. It could have gone, we don't have enough grass, there's more building, grass can't sustain the weather, horses to go out less. Thankfully, I think a lot of people won't stand for that. They just won't let their horses not go out, or they don't want to be on yards that allow that. I mean, even me with my amazing night turnout, there was a point where Harley's friend that he was going out with left the yard, and we had a conversation. We were like, oh, should we flip him over and turn him out during the day with other friends? And I was like, oh, I really want to keep him out going out at night. I think he really likes it. I love the idea of him being out for as long as possible. Like you said, it's the closest we have to 24/7 turnout, while he can also come in, recharge, rest, eat. etc.
Yeah.
Dry off a bit, dry his feet a bit, But I often think, like, what would I do if I didn't have the yard I'm at? Because I'm a perpetual worrier. And, like, when I look around at the yards, it's the choice is few, like, in terms of a turnout and decent land. And it would definitely be a case of sacrificing some of your human loves, which is always the thing on yards, isn't it? Some of these yards look amazing for people and terrible for the horses. And I think it would probably be a DIY situation. Which I would happily do if it meant that my horse, well, maybe not happily, I mean, who wants to do 4 a.m.s, but I would do it if it meant that my horse could go out either all year round or more. So I think the pendulum is swinging in the right way, but we really want to talk about track livery and everything in a whole episode, because I think that's a very interesting answer to the challenges.
Definitely. And I think it's starting to, there's a lot of places in Europe now that that's how they keep horses, and I think it's starting to shift. We are part of the conversation, and I'm proud to be part of that conversation, and I hope that this podcast becomes a space of just igniting ideas and inspiring people to maybe push a little and ask questions and not feel like they can't advocate for their horses, and that advocating for our horses is actually what we're all trying to do. Definitely food for thought and an interesting topic.
One final thing, I always dream about like having horses at home. I mean, we all do, don't we? The country house and whatever. But in recent years, and I don't know if it's because I spent time looking at retirement places for Woody, but like you see so many retirement homes where they just have big cow sheds so the horses live together and then they go out in the field. And I was like, yeah, that's actually really cool. Like if you could just have them live, and they all got on, and you could just have them living in like a big giant stable where they get to touch each other and whatever whenever they want and turn out. Why would you not do that? It's really made me think, if I had them at home, would I want the pretty individual stables or would I just have a big cow shed?
The key with the big cow shed is all the horses have to be there all the time. So it's it's more difficult to have horses migrating in and out. So like for myself, I would love to have a track one day, but I will also have to have individual stables for that reason, because I wouldn't be able to just have it. You wouldn't be able to have all of the horses doing that all of the time. I think if I only had my own horses, yeah, for sure. They're all just going to live in a big old barn together. But it's complicated. Horse management is the bane of my life. And, you know, running a yard is something that takes a lot of logistical jiggery pokery, you know. All the time it's okay, that horse is seeing the physio, so they're not going to be able to go out till that time, which means that their herd mates need to stay in, so we'll exercise those ones, and then we'll do me and Lucy, the girl who's she's my head girl, every day we talk about the logistics of the situation for the best benefit of the horse. And one of my clients said to me this week, she's been a bit unwell, my client, and so she's had to like step back and we've been doing everything for her horses for a little while. And she said to me the other day, she said, I just want you to know that I trust you implicitly, that if they couldn't go in the field for whatever reason, then I know that you're going to make sure that they are leaving their stable multiple times. So don't worry if the weather's really terrible and you can't give them the ideal situation, because I trust you that you're going to do right by them. I think that's a really like core thing. Like you've got to get to the point where you really trust the person who's offering you that full livery, like you have with your coach. Because if you had to go into hospital and you were unconscious for 3 days, you would absolutely not be in your unconscious state thinking, oh my god, Harley's not going to be okay. You'd be like, it's totally fine, I'm going to have my little nap now. This is a weird tangent to have gone on, but you get my drift. That trust is so important. If you don't feel that, because your beliefs don't align, there will be a constant grating feeling, and that is maybe what then leads to friction.
Yeah, very hard. You're right, that was great.
Very hard. Thanks. So that rounds up episode 3 of our lovely new podcast. How exciting.
Next week, we're going to be discussing careers. We had a couple of questions about Miri and I's careers, and we've got some really special guests. We tried to bring people who have really different careers, both in and out of the equine space, that we thought would be interesting. And it's going to be an all-female cast, actually, which is fabulous. I was going to swear, but I won't. We love that. So
we love that.
Get excited for that.
Power.
Yep. And if you have any other questions for our Agony Aunt section, feel free to share them. Equally, if you have any viewing stories of your own that you would like to share, then feel free. Preferably leave names out if you're going to be slanderous, but otherwise, we're excited to hear them.
Can't wait to roast someone. If you have got a question, please send us an Instagram DM. You can also send us an email, which we'll put in the show notes if you have a slightly longer question, or you can send us a voice note and we can play it on the podcast next week. So, see us listen in next week, Wednesday morning, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
See you next week. Bye.
If you're looking for a simple way to support your horse's confidence, try Premier Performance Calming Cookies. Competition legal, magnesium free, and easy to use when you need them. Because a calm horse is a happy horse. Find out more at premierperformance.uk. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.